I think we should start now. So just to give everyone a brief introduction, I'm Sevjan and I am the Marketing Executive for Knowledge Train. Knowledge Train and Agile KLC are in partnership. We have Bina with us today, so thank you so much for joining, Bina. Just
Thank
before
you.
I head over to Bina, right at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please jot them down in the chat section, or if you have any suggestions or comments, you can always jot them down and we'll go over them right at the end. Bina, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, just unmuted myself. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today for this webinar. I really appreciate you being here. I mean, you could have been outside in the sunshine having a nice walk, but I'm so glad that you decided to join, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much. Now, my webinar is titled Project Manage Your Life, and that might seem like a strange title. And you might be asking yourself, why do we need to project manage our life? You know, what are we doing in our life that's a project? And the kind of questions I'm thinking of asking is that, you know, are you having sleepless nights over something you need to get done? Are you stressing over a personal project, something that you need to get done? And have you got something like a to-do list that's always growing? So for me, I think these are general things that we all need to manage in everyday life. And I certainly can say yes to a lot of these questions. So what I'm going to show you is how I manage these things in daily life using things from project management. So project management is the area that I deliver training in, I've managed in. So I thought, why not use what I know about project management in things related to daily life. So I'm actually going to share two stories with you and show you how I managed these kind of things. And give you an introduction of what we're going to cover over this session is I'm going to give you a brief introduction about myself, and then we'll talk about what is a project, just very generally, and what kind of projects you might have. And then the two stories I'm going to give. So story number one is about a project. And then I'll finish off by giving a summary of what I used to manage that from what I know about project management practices. During that story, there's going to be some poll questions for you to answer. And then I'll move on to story number two, which is about the to-do list. And again, I'll explain how I manage that and give you a summary that I use from the project management practices. And then finishing off, I'll give you what I think is my key takeaway from this session. And then there'll be a Q&A session. So please write your questions, comments in the chat, and we'll take your questions at the end of the end of the session. It's great to see so many people here, and some people that I know, some people that I've trained before, some people that I don't know. So thank you very much for joining me. I'm hoping that you'll learn something from here that's going to be of practical use to you as it was for me. So I'll start with an introduction of myself. What's my background? What's my journey been? And there's a lot of information on here. Now, long time ago, I actually studied fashion. So in the top left-hand corner, you see some diagrams that I did long time ago, probably in the 80s, when I was studying fashion. So I worked in the fashion industry for about 7 years. That was really helpful because I learned a lot about design, specifications, manufacturing, quality control, something called iterative development, which some of you may have heard of. That's basically where, say, I would design a blouse for a customer, get it made, show it to the customer, could be Tesco's or some other kind of retail organization. They'd look at it and they'd come back with feedback, and they might say, change the collar, change the sleeves or whatever. So I would make those changes, go back until it's approved. So that's one way of manufacturing, but also a lot of customer collaboration. So I spent about 7 years working for different manufacturers on swimwear, lingerie, leisurewear, etc. The two companies you see below, AMF and Lectra, one's American, one's French, they were manufacturers of computer-aided design and manufacture systems. So I ended up working for those companies because they made systems for the apparel industry, for anybody who was cutting something out of fabric. So I ended up delivering training courses, doing a lot of user testing, and a lot of international travel training operators of the systems. So gradually I moved on to the IT side of things and also worked for a company called Torex Retail, who supplied electronic point of sale systems. So I was a project manager helping to install systems at client sites. In the middle, at the bottom, you see a company called Mace, which you may or may not know is a construction company. So I set up a project support office for about 10 project managers, and we were based at the customer's site. So that was a good insight into what project managers need, how to support them, what kind of information needed to pass to and from the customer, for instance. Now, in the middle is a logo. This is Breda University, and probably a lot of you have never heard of Breda University. You're wondering, where is that? I've never heard of it. It's actually in the Netherlands, and that's where I lived for 11 years, working for this university. It was an international university, and I joined the university to primarily to set up courses in project management for two different programs. So I developed courses, delivered courses in project management as well as other subjects. Whilst at the university, I also managed several of their projects like new program development, accreditation, etc. And that was really helpful because I could see and apply what was needed in terms of project management for the university per project. Also at the university, I managed to bring in a project called Green Bubbles, which sounds like a strange name, but it's actually, I brought it in via a friend who was a marine biologist. And the project was an EU-funded project run by a consortium of 9 different organizations from different countries. And we were involved as a university on that project. It was all about marine protected areas, specifically one of the case study locations was in Italy. So I was lucky enough to lead a team of 10 of my colleagues on this project. We went to Italy several times, which was really good fun, very, very helpful. And we looked at things like marketing and business models of organizations, as well as developing a virtual reality underwater experience. That was a really good project to learn about dealing with international partners, if you like. Now, 3 years ago, I moved back to the UK, and on my return, I did work on a project for the University of Bradford, on a project about team-based learning. And I also worked for the University of Leeds in partnership with the Alan Turing Institute on a project about data analysis, taking data from various big clients like Network Rail, Asda, and so on, and coming up with some kind of analysis of that data. What I'm doing now, though, is delivering courses in Agile Project Management, Prince2, and Prince2 Agile. So as you can see at the top there, I'm an accredited trainer for those three specific project management approaches. And I also have some other certifications, but that's what my focus is now, is delivering training for various organizations, including Knowledge Train. So that's enough about me. Sounds like I've done a lot. I have for a long period of time. I'm not going to tell you how long because you probably think, wow, you must be really old. Well, I guess I must be really old. Anyway, let's move on. That's my introduction. Now, my 2 stories are story number 1, how I planned my big move project. And story number 2, how I took control of my ever-growing to-do list. So maybe you can relate to these stories. Maybe you've been in similar situations. Just waiting for the slide to move on. 1 second. There we go. So the reason why I call it Project Manage Your Life is because we all face challenges in life when we need to get things done. Things like organizing a wedding, finding a job, having a new kitchen fitted, new bathroom, moving home, etc. We all want to get things done in life, and you could class these as personal projects. So what I want to show you is how you can use good practices from project management to help you with your own personal projects. And that's what my stories are going to show you. But I think what we should do is first of all establish what is a project. Just waiting for the slide. There we go. So a project is something where you have an idea. So we see a light bulb there in the left-hand corner, and you have an idea that you want something. You want to get something done. And before you get that done, you've got the questions like, why do I want this? What do I want? When do I want it? All the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves before we spend our own money to do something. And on the right-hand side are possibly some typical kind of personal projects like organizing a party, writing a book or an article, moving home, getting married, organizing a wedding, having a new kitchen fitted, or even going on a journey. So maybe some of you can relate to those and think, yes, I'm going to be doing that, or I'm in the middle of doing that. That's a kind of a project. So you're managing this journey from your idea to get what you want. Now, that journey on the diagram looks like a very straight line, You're going from A to B. But of course, we know in reality, it takes twists and turns and a lot of things that you have to think about, or that things happen that you didn't expect. You have to make changes. But ultimately, you're going on this journey. And during that journey, you're managing your tasks, what has to be done, the time it has to be done, the costs, what the quality is, what materials do you need, what resources you need, etc. Who do you have to communicate with, and so on. So we manage this journey. Same as on a project in your organization, if you're running projects in your own personal life, you're still going on this journey to manage your project. So I have a question coming up, which is a poll question. So Shevchan's going to set up the poll. And the questions are, question 1, have you moved house recently? Say probably in the last year or so. Question 2, have you moved house and country recently? Excuse me. And question 3, what was it like to manage? If you did this by yourself, was it easy, okay, hard, or very hard? Maybe you moved house many years ago, you can relate to that. Thank you. Okay, I can see some scores coming up on the poll. Interesting to see. Right. Let's just give it a few more moments for people to finish the poll. So what we have you moved house recently? About 19 people said they have. 21 said not recently, so maybe they moved in the past, for instance. Have you moved house and country recently? So about 9 people have. So that's interesting, actually, moving house and country, whereas 30% have said they haven't moved country, but maybe they moved their house. And then interesting to see, what was it like to manage? 2 people said it was easy. 18%, 19 people, said okay. Hard, about 5 people, and 4 said it was very hard. So you've all had different experiences about moving. That's really good to get that kind of feedback. Okay, thank you very much, Sebchan, for running that poll. We can end that poll, and I'll go back to the slides. Yeah. So thank you for your feedback on that. Let's look at this a bit further. Now, you may know this already, but according to Google, these are the most stressful life events that people may experience. So I did a quick search and it came up with things like death of a loved one, divorce, moving, major illness or injury, job loss. And maybe you can think of some more to that. But these are classed as stressful events that we may experience in life, maybe more than one, maybe more than one at a time also. So, going to my experience now and my story, I actually experienced 3 of these at the same time. So, for me, it was the death of a loved one. My mum passed away in February 2020. I moved house and country in March 2020, so 3 years ago, if you like, and then leaving a job, friends, and the place I called home for the last 11 years. Now, I didn't lose the job. I left the job. I decided to move back to the UK. But there was obviously some sadness because I was leaving a place I'd known, friends I'd known for a long time. So all that was going on, plus the emergence of the pandemic. So just to add things to it, make things more difficult, we had the emergence of the pandemic at the same time. And my move was effectively this. I'll just wait for the slide to change. Yeah. So we see a little map there, and we see there's a map in the Netherlands there, Breda, the city I used to live in. So my move involved going from Breda to Rotterdam, getting the ferry, sailing across the North Sea to Hull, and then driving to Bradford. But it wasn't just a case of me moving, it was everything I owned, all my worldly possessions had to be moved. You know, lock, stock, and barrel. I had to move everything. So it wasn't just about me getting on a ferry and doing the move. I had to move all my furniture and everything. So I felt totally overwhelmed and very stressed. And I knew I only had one shot at this. I couldn't go back and say, okay, I'll go back and finish that off later. You know, it was a one shot I had to have. I had to get everything finished on time. And of course, because I lived on my own, I moved on my own, I basically had to do this all on my own. So that was a major challenge, a major project, you can call it. So I started asking a lot of questions. Where do I start? You know, how do I manage this? Can I actually do this? What do I actually have to do? What's the scope of my project? To me, this was a huge personal project that I had to manage on my own, very challenging. And you know, what if things didn't go right? What if I missed something that was important? How would that affect me? So lots and lots of questions, and as you can imagine, a lot of sleepless nights. I had to find answers to my questions, and I needed to think of a way of managing my big move project. And it was all in my head, all these things I had to do. So I thought I need to visualize what I was faced with. I need to see what I was faced with. It was no good being going round and round in my head. I needed to see what I needed to do. So I decided to use the product-based planning technique from Prince 2. So some of you that may have done Prince 2, you might be familiar with that. If you're not to worry, I'm going to show you what it's like. So I use this approach to help me. Now, very briefly, what is product-based planning about? It involves the following. So there's various steps. But the first one is describe your product. So I would need to describe what's my aim? You know, what's the big move all about? What's involved? What do I expect from it? And so on. So I know what my end goal is. Then I would create what we call a breakdown structure, which I'll show you an example of, to be able to visualize the scope. Scope is, you know, what's involved in this project. So again, it was going back to getting it out of my head and making it visual so I could see what I was faced with. Then following on from that, I could create another kind of diagram to show me what do I do first? What do I do next? What's the order that these things need to happen in? So there's a lot of visualization involved in this technique, and that's why I decided to use it, because I think visualizing things really helped me. In fact, you're going to see a photo of my original breakdown structure. So this is what I created on a cork board with sticky notes, not very neat handwriting, but not to worry. But this is what I used to help me manage my project. I don't have this anymore because I obviously the project finished and I needed to get rid of all those things. But I made my challenge visual, and that's the main message I want to put here just now. So I'm going to actually show you how I created that. So if I look at it in a digital form, I started to create something called a breakdown structure. At the very top is my ultimate goal, which was the big move. And then underneath is a scope, is what had to be done for this project. So for example, in the top left-hand corner, you've got import car, because that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to bring my Dutch car to the UK. So import car was part of the scope of the project. I had to arrange my travel. I had to organize all my stuff. I had to do all my packing, even finish off some Dutch administration tasks and so on. of course, cleaning my apartment and miscellaneous. So that top line helped me understand the areas that I needed to work on for my project. So that gave me a good kind of foundation to work on. Then I started looking at each area of scope and thought, okay, what is it that I actually have to get done to do for this? So, for example, to import my car, I had to get it ready to be used in the UK, like get UK number plates organised, get the headlight modification organised, and so on. A lot of paperwork. So that was related to importing the car. And then I looked at all the other areas of scope, like storage, removals, and so on, and started to add other tasks, other things I needed to get done actually for that. So I got storage in the UK, removals company, and so on. By the way, I've actually written things like travel booked, storage space booked. It's like what you get when you've done this. It's not I need to book storage, but storage space needs to get booked. So that's the accomplishment of the task. What should I get when it's done? So that's why I wrote it down like that. Again, this was helping me to see what was involved in each area of the scope. So I added some more items, as you see there. Okay, looks a bit busy now, and this is actually simplified compared to the one that I had, for real. But it helped me see what I was faced with. And again, it was getting it out of my head, making it visual, and giving me a lot of clarity. And I could see that there was, for instance, with the Dutch admin, there were lot more things involved, for instance, important things I needed to get done. I also had a column for miscellaneous, so things that didn't belong anywhere else, but it was handy to have that. And that included things like apartment keys handed over. That was one of the last things I had to do before I actually moved. So that gave me a really good starting point. So this is a product breakdown structure. And what I also did from this was add what we call key milestones. So we can see some items with the red stars on. These are things I thought I must get these done by a particular time because if I don't, my project's going to be late. It could have a knock on effect to everything else. So I would be managing things and thinking, okay, removals company must be booked by this particular date. My travel must be booked by this particular date. So these are sort of milestones. And that also helped me focus on time scales on what was important to complete. So just to recap, this is a product breakdown structure to help me plan for my project. Another way you could do this, and in the Prince 2 manual, there's an example of something called a mind map. So I could have created a mind map, for instance. If those of you that like doing mind maps, then you could still use that. Again, it's making something visual. And there in the middle, I've got my big move. And then to the sides, I've got the various areas of scope and then all the different products. So that's another way of visualizing what was involved in my project. Another alternative that's also mentioned in the Prince 2 manual is that you could do a list like this, for instance. So I'm still separating the areas of scope, and then I've got the different things that need to be get done. So if I just recap, so we've got the list, we've got the mind map, and we've got the product breakdown structure. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question, another poll question coming up. Which do you prefer? Out of the three that you've seen, which do you prefer? Whoops, sorry, I've gone a bit too fast. Let's go back a bit. This should be, yeah, which did you prefer? The breakdown structure, the mind map, or the list? So that's our next poll question. Thank you. All right. That's good to see. Breakdown structure wins, everybody, with about 24 people going for the breakdown structure. Mind map, 6 people, list nine people. So at the end of the day, you choose whatever suits you, what you feel comfortable with. The main thing is that you're seeing the information and use whatever feels good to you. Yeah, good for you. What works for you? Yeah, thank you very much for that poll question, Sevchan. I'll go back to the slides now. Okay. So to summarize why I use the breakdown structure and what it helped me, you can see a lot of information on there. But I think the key message I'd like to give here is that it gave me confidence. And that was really important because to manage this huge task on my own, I needed to get it done. And by organizing my work, by creating a breakdown structure and knowing what I had to get done and the order things were going to be done in, did give me confidence that I felt I could do this. To be honest, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't done a breakdown structure. It would have been really, really difficult to manage, considering the amount of scope I had for the project and everything else that was going on in life at the time. So I really found that useful. It gave me confidence, which was important to me. Taking that further, then, you think, well, what do you do next? You've got a breakdown structure, tells you everything that has to be done. What's next? Well, then I needed to think about, well, what do I do first? What do I do next? What do I need to do first before something else can be done? Is there a connection? Is there a dependency between them? So again, I wanted to visualize this, the order, the sequence things have to be done in. So I took my post-it notes from my cork board, and then I started laying them down into what I thought would need to be done first and next. So we've got there, for example, in the left-hand corner, we've got removal companies researched. That leads to removal quotes assessed, and that leads to removal companies booked. So I could quite clearly see the order these things had to be done in, and that would be a milestone that I would reach at the end of that. Then I started adding other items to this flow diagram. Now it's going to start getting to look a bit busy, and we can see arrows and connections going all over the place. Um, but ultimately, everything is leading to the big move at the bottom of the screen. That's my aim. So everything I was doing had to flow into the big move. So if I add some more items now, you can see it's going to look busier. Yeah. So, for example, at the top, I've got all these items that need to be sorted from my kitchen, my lounge, utility room, bedrooms, and so on. So these could be done um, independently of removing of the removals company. So not everything was connected. That had different start points. But of course, things like getting the boxes, I had to get the boxes first before I could pack. And before I could pack, I needed to decide what was going into storage and what was going into the house. So that's why you see a lot of arrows there, a lot of dependencies between them. So I'll just add the rest of the items. And I'm sorry, it looks a busy diagram, but that's what. Oops, sorry, that's what it looked like actually. But it helped me to see the different start points, the dependencies, and what was the order I had to get things done in. Yeah. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you see apartment keys handed over. So that was like the last thing I had to do before I left the Netherlands. You know, I'd sold my apartment, I'd cleaned it, I had to give the keys to the estate agents before I could actually physically move. Otherwise, you know, if I left the Netherlands with the keys, I don't think the new owner would be very happy. So that was like a major milestone. Once I'd handed the keys over, I knew that I'd moved everything out of the apartment. So that's what we call a flow diagram. And maybe you've done something similar, but it helps you to look at the order that things have to be done in and the dependencies. So to make that work for me, then, what I did was create a very simple kind of timeline. So in Prince 2, it says you create a schedule. So this is a very simplified view of a schedule. And what you can see are all the milestones, and then I attached dates to them. So I knew that, for example, the storage items had to be packed, the house items need to be packed by a certain date. So that gave me a good kind of guideline as to what to finish by what date. So this is a simplified kind of view of the timeline, but it's still part of the Prince 2 planning technique. So that's all to do with what did I have to do, when was it going to happen, what's the order, and so on. Now, something else that I mentioned was writing a product description. So in Prince 2, they suggest write product description for your goal, ultimate goal, and then write product descriptions for everything else. So for example, I needed storage space. So ideally, I should have written something like this. I didn't, and I'll explain why I didn't and what happened because I didn't. But if I wanted to be very clear about the storage space that I needed and for it to be absolutely right, then I would say, look, I need storage space. Why do I need it? Because not everything's going to go in the house. Some things are going to go into storage. Composition, what should be in that storeroom. So obvious things like there should be a lock on the door, storeroom number, and so on. But what's really important is a quality criteria. And this is where I missed out actually, because it was very difficult to identify. But what I should have done was said, I need a room that's X meters by X meters and so on, the size of it, things like, yes, it has a lockable door and everything. But it was hard for me at the time to actually think how big should the storage space be, because unless I'd put everything that was going to go into storage in one corner of the room and measured it, I wouldn't know. So I had conversations with the storeroom manager, kind of explained what I needed, and he interpreted that maybe there was miscommunication. But actually, the storage space was far too small, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But this is something from Prince 2, which suggests be clear on what you want, because if you do, there's a better chance of actually getting it. So that's a simple example of a product breakdown structure. No, it isn't. Product description. Sorry, got product breakdown structures on my brain. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, how did it all go, Bina? How was your big move? Well, let's talk about the storage space first in the bottom left-hand corner. And it was a bit like that. The storeroom was so jam-packed when I got there. The removal guys got there before I did. They arrived in the UK before me. They offloaded the van and they basically rammed everything they thought should go into the storeroom like that. So I opened the door, almost like everything fell out. I couldn't even go in the storeroom. So that was not really to my satisfaction, but I should have been a bit clearer. So in the end, I had to pay for a much larger storage space and get everything moved. And also, the removal men didn't really look at the labels. What should have been in the storeroom ended up in the house in some cases, and vice versa. So there was a lot of rejigging of where things should be. So the storage space was not a very good experience, unfortunately. But I've learned a big lesson from that. The picture in the middle, you might think, why have I got a picture of a yucca tree? Well, my yucca tree is now about 7 foot tall. It's certainly taller than me. And that moved from the Netherlands to the UK in the removal van, probably bent over a little bit, but it survived. And actually, since moving to the UK, it's now in its third resting place, and I think it will stay there. So that survived, thankfully. Bottom right-hand corner is my imported car. Um, well, I love that car. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. I sold it because I realized it was far too impractical to drive a car with the steering wheel on the wrong side of the road, sort of the car, especially when you come to roundabouts or car parks and so on. You go to a car park, you can't get the ticket out because you've got to run around the other side, get the ticket, and so on. So, for practical purposes, it was impractical actually. So I did sell it, having done everything to import it. I kept it for a while and then sold it. Bear with me 1 second. And the last picture at the top was from a view from my ferry window when I was leaving the Netherlands. Now, there's a huge sigh of relief that I was actually leaving. Everything was done, the keys were handed over, the apartment was left empty, the removal men had gone. So there was a huge relief that everything was done on time. But there was a lot of sadness as well, leaving a place that was my home, my friends, and everything I knew into the unknown, if you like, well, back to the UK. So that little strip of land that you see was the last bit of the Netherlands that I saw as I sailed off into the sunset. So that was kind of a summary of how my big move went. I'm going to give you a summary of Prince 2, not too much theory, but just a very, very brief kind of information about it. So, Prince 2 stands for Projects in Controlled Environments. It's one of the certifications that I teach. It's been around for a long time. It started off in 1975, and now we have a revised version of the manual in 2017. Of course, it's still going. It's 2023. Prince 2 is still here to stay. It consists of, as you see on the left-hand side, processes, themes, and principles, and the environment itself. And the key to using Prince 2 is about tailoring it to suit your project. It can be used for any kind of project size, type, or environment. It's well recognized in many different countries, and the manual is available in 18 languages. And I actually did my originally did my Prince 2 in way back in 2002, after which I taught Prince 2 for quite a few years. So it's still going strong, and I wanted to pick out something that I really like from Prince 2 to show you. Okay, so I'm just wondering if there are any questions related to this story. I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat and see, before I move on to the next story, let's have a look. Sometimes I prefer breakdown structure, depends. Yeah, Mariana, you've obviously used the breakdown structure, so sometimes you prefer that, depends on what you're doing. Can you recommend any software which makes dependency diagrams quickly and easily? I don't know if you've used Miro, but I really like Miro. I don't know if anybody's used that. That's something certainly worth playing around with. You can get a free version of it, and you can do breakdown structures, you can connect items, you can draw arrows. So that might be something worth looking at. Sarah, you moved from the Netherlands to London, color-coded boxes, storage house. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. I had just had white labels, and I should have color-coded them, so that really helps. So it's good that you've experienced something similar. Okay, thank you. If there are any other questions, we can have a look at those later. So that's the end of story number 1. So I'm hoping that you've learned something that you think, oh, I might try that for my own personal project. Story number 2 then is slightly different. And this is about, can I get to my story number 2? Sorry, just trying to advance the slide 1 second. It's about an ever-growing to-do list. And I'm assuming that you all have a to-do list that seems to be shrinking, growing, always there on your mind. It is on mine anyway, but it's an ever-present to-do list. And I'm thinking about it in the daytime, in the nighttime, and so many things on there. So sometimes maybe you can relate to this. I'd wake up in the night thinking about my to-do list. Wake up in the morning thinking about it. My mind is overactive. I start thinking about it. And then I even start working on it in my mind. I start thinking about something and trying to work on it, trying to plan it at any time of day. So that was the message I'm saying, is you're working on this anytime, which is not what you want, because it's almost like you're being controlled by your to-do list. So one night, I think it was around New Year's Eve, it was kind of a New Year's resolution. I said, stop, Bina, you can't keep doing this. Daytime's for working, nighttime is for sleeping. Sounds simple, but it requires some discipline, and I'll show you how I managed this. So I felt I needed to take control of my to-do list. Instead of it controlling me, I needed to do something about it. And I needed to ask some questions. So these are the questions I asked myself. First of all, what exactly was on my to-do list? What are all these items that I've listed that need to get done? Was each item important? Question number 2. Was it urgent? Was it important? Did it matter if I didn't get it done? Question number 3. Okay, if I decided to do something, how long will it take to complete? And then question number 4, when will I actually do this? When will I work on this item on my TDL? So I kind of explored my TDL in a little bit more detail and asked some questions. So for the first question, what was actually on my TDL, I looked to another project management method that I am aware of, that I teach and have practiced, which is DSDM Agile PM. Okay, so Agile is a different way of working. And from that, there's a practice called user stories, where you're describing a requirement. And the way they're written is you write, as a user, what do I need and why? So when I looked at my items on my to-do list, I tried to sort of explain them in this sense. So here's an example of a user story relating to me. So I've got them as a trainer. What do I need? I need to know if a course is confirmed. Why? So that I can arrange my travel to the training location. So that gave me a lot more clarity about what it was that I needed to get done, and why. And then acceptance criteria is really, what would make it good? What would be the quality of it? Quality criteria. So what do I need? I actually need proof of course confirmation. And also, can I get the confirmation within 2 weeks of the course start date? So that gave me a lot more clarity of what I had to get done, why, and what was important about it. So that's the concept of user stories. It helped me understand what was on my to-do list. And then with all these user stories, I thought I'm going to organize these. And maybe this looks familiar to you. It's a bit like a product breakdown structure. I've still got the different categories. So on my to-do list, there were things to do with the home, work, health, travel, personal, miscellaneous, etc. And if we look at the one under travel, I've written there train and hotel. So I had some user stories where I had to book a train. So I was traveling to London. I had to book a train. I had to book a hotel. So these are things that I had to get done. So again, I looked at visualizing my user story. So this is also quite helpful again to see what you need to get done. The next question was each item important? All these things on my to-do list, are they all urgent? Are they all important? And for this, I use Moscow prioritization, which also comes from Agile PM. And Moscow stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have for now. So I would look at each user story and say, okay, is this really a must have? Is it really important that I get this done? Is it a showstopper if I don't get this done? Is it going to mean that something's going to be missing and I can't do what I'm supposed to do? In project terms, if something you don't deliver is a must have, it might mean that it's illegal or unsafe or something like that. So I would look very carefully at each of my stories and decide, is it a must have? Maybe it's a should have. It's something that I do expect, but if I can't get that done, maybe there's a bit of a temporary workaround, for instance. Temporary, ideally I should get it done, but maybe I have to do something temporary to make sure the job can get done. But then I would have to come back and readdress it. And then could have is a nice to have. Won't have for now could mean that, well, I don't need to do this today. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Maybe I'll do it next week. Maybe I'll do it next month or another project, for instance. So what you see there on the right-hand side is my to-do list with the different categories, with the different stories identified. Excuse me one second. Sorry, got a bit of a cough and I didn't want to cough all over you. Sorry. Back again. Yes, I was saying that I identified my stories as must have, should have, could have, and won't have for now. Not everything is a must have, because if I said everything was a must have, excuse me, I would be setting myself up for failure, because not everything is that important. So it requires some discipline and understanding of what is important. That's what happens when you talk a lot, you lose your voice. Anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so I prioritized my stories, making sure everything was not a must have. So I knew what I had to focus on. So the next question would be, how long is it all going to take to complete? Yeah. So estimation. Now, I would have to base this on experience. I think, well, how long did it take me last time to do this? How long is it going to take me this time? Is it something I've done before? Is it more complicated? And so I would learn from my mistakes actually. So something that I thought was going to take an hour might take 2 hours. So I think, okay, next time I'll have to remember it takes longer. So I would estimate how long these stories would take. Obviously, I wouldn't want to overburden myself, for example, and try and be as realistic as possible. So that was something I had to learn over time, how long things were going to take. Um, and that would certainly help me plan going forward. So the last question is, when will I actually work on my TDL? And this is where the practice of time boxing comes in from Agile. Okay, so you've got, think of a box as like an analogy. You've got to fit something in that box. You don't want to overcram it with things. What can you realistically fit in that time box, bearing in mind your capability and the estimates of how long it's going to take? So effectively, you create a time box into which you fit in the amount of work you are capable of completing as a team on a project, or me on my own in this case. So of course, I had to be realistic and say, what can I realistically fit in? I don't want to overburden myself, but I also want to make sure I get things done that I can get done. So I'm going to show you an analogy of a time box, which I sometimes use when I'm training, and maybe you've seen it before, but I like to use the concept of a suitcase. So here is my analogy for a time box. So imagine you're going on holiday and you've got a suitcase, and that's your suitcase. It's not going to stretch, it's going to be that size, and you've got to fit in what you're going to take on holiday in that suitcase. You don't want to overload it, because we know what will happen. They'll end up charging you lots of money if your suitcase is overweight, for instance. So in my example, let's say I was going on a scuba diving holiday, and I've got all my equipment there on the left-hand side. These are all my must-haves. These are things that I want to take with me if I was going on a diving holiday, because these are things I know fit me, I know how they work, and so on. Those are my must-haves that must fit into my suitcase. And then I've got other things like clothes, etc., in that suitcase. So that's the analogy of a time box. Is you've got a certain amount of time or space. What can you fit in that? What's important? What can you leave out? So maybe I won't take the shampoo or the hat because I think there's no room for that. I can buy one when I'm there, for instance. So, by the way, the suitcase in the middle isn't my suitcase, it's just a picture. The picture on the right hand side shows my actual suitcase. And you might think, why is a cat sat in the back, sat on your suitcase? Well, I don't know. It wasn't even my cat. It was a cat that used to come and visit. And I don't know why, but pets seem to do this. When they see a case, they want to sit in it. So the cat thought I was coming on holiday. And I said, no, you are a won't have this time or ever. You're not coming with me. Sorry. So that's a won't have ever kind of thing. So that's my analogy of a suitcase. So hopefully that helps you understand the no, analogy of a time box using a suitcase. So in putting things in my time box, so like my suitcase example, I've got a time box, fixed period of time. I would look at what's going to add value first. So if you've got a list of things to do and you think, I'm going to do these things today, you might pick the most important things. What's going to give you the most value? You might pick out the must haves first and say, that's going to be important. For example, it's important if I reply to that email today, or it's important that I phone that customer today. You put in whatever is going to give you value first. And that really helps to make sure you focus on what your priorities are. Just a little bit more about a time box without giving you too much theory, hopefully, is that a time box has got some kind of structure. So at the start of my time box, say a time box is for a day, I'd look at what do I need to get done, what stories I'm going to work on, Then I would work on my stories and check my work. Is it okay? Do that quality check, for instance, and then tie up loose ends, see what wasn't done, what was done, what do I need to carry over, etc. And have a review, meaning really check your work as you're going along. Is it okay? And during this process, you're checking your progress. You're also learning lessons along the way and preparing for the next time box. So there's a bit of structure involved in working through your user stories. So that's about planning. Now, managing the work. Again, I use something quite visual. Yeah. So you see on the right-hand side, I created 3 columns. You can call these what you want, but ready, doing, and done. So I would decide what stories I was going to work on, and ready meant that I had everything I needed to know about it. They were ready to be worked on. So effectively, I'd take a story that was ready, start working on it, and move it across to doing. And then when I'd finished, I'd put it in the column called done, which was the great place to be because I knew that was finished. Tick against that made me happy. I know that I'd finished that. So this is again a visual way of managing your work. Maybe you've used boards like this. Maybe some of you are familiar with something called Kanban board, where you're also moving work along. There's lots of different apps and things to help you. But again, it's about visualizing my progress. So to summarize, really, my daily time box was from 9:30 to 4:30. And I decided that was the time I was going to work on my tasks as well as do other things as well. But I needed to get my tasks done during that time. So when it was 4:30, my time box was finished. I didn't extend the time. The time box is fixed. So effectively closed off, shut shop, gone home. That was it. That was the end of the work that I did. So I felt like I was in control of my to-do list by applying these things. So just a quick recap, how did I take control? I looked at what was on my to-do list by looking at user stories, being clear about the information, decided what was important about each item by prioritizing them, estimating how long each one will take to complete, and then creating a time box to decide when I will do the work. So, to summarize, really, how did that help me? Well, from DSDM, which stands for Dynamic Systems Development Method, I know somebody asked that question in the chat there. I use the practices of user stories plus Moscow prioritization plus time boxing because they work together very well. And I felt more productive. I knew that I had to get something done, what I had to get done. I learned about my capability, what could I actually achieve in that time frame. I separated my work and non-work time, but I must admit it requires some discipline. I had to think, okay, I'm not gonna do this now. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Uh, I'm gonna plan what I'm gonna do tomorrow, sort of thing. So it did require some discipline, but I felt like I could manage my workload, and that was a great help actually. But I'm still learning. It still requires discipline, but it's something that I'm going to keep practicing, and hopefully you'll get a chance to try something like that. So here's a quick recap on what is DSDM Agile PM. Very, very briefly, you see a picture of the manual in the middle. It's available in 4 languages. It's been around for a long time, and maybe some of you are familiar with the word Agile. Agile's been around for a long time. There's also things like Agile Manifesto and things. I won't go in too much into theory, but Agile PM involves what we see there, the temple on the right-hand side, things like philosophy, principles, etc. Now, there are a lot of principles, but I've purposely picked 2 things from Agile here, which I think are really good to understand. One is called iterative development. And the way I can explain that is that, say you were making dinner for friends and you made a you made a curry or something like that, you'd taste it while you're cooking it. And you might think, well, I'm not sure if it's spicy enough. I'm going to get another family member to taste it. So you get somebody to taste it. They taste it and they might think, well, actually, it's not spicy enough. We need some more chili. So you can put more chili in. And then they taste it again and they think, yeah, that's great. Or they might say, no, add a bit more salt. So you go through this process of working on something, getting feedback, until you get it right. So that's an aspect of Agile project management. And hopefully the analogy of cooking dinner and getting it tested helps you understand that. And then incremental delivery, again, I'll relate it to food. You know, if you're cooking a three-course meal for your guests, you're not going to bring to the table everything in one go. You're not going to say, here you are, here's the starter, the main, and the dessert all in one go. But you would deliver the starter first. So you deliver a chunk of it, then you deliver the main course, then you deliver the dessert. So that's incremental delivery. I just wanted to give you a bit of understanding of what that means from an agile perspective. So then to wrap things up, just to remind you of the two stories. Story one about my big move project and how I use Prince2 to help me plan that and make it happen. And story number two, how I managed my ever growing to do list. Instead of it controlling me, I took control of it by using what I know from Agile PM, user stories, Moscow, and time boxing. So these things are used in companies and projects, but in my mind, why not use them for everyday life? You know, it certainly helped me. And then my last sort of keynote, not keynote, key key takeaway is that visualize things as you've seen that I've done. For me, definitely works. If I visualize things, then I know what I have to do, give me a sense of knowing, sense of awareness, something that I can control, and also monitor my progress. Okay, so that's the last information from me. Do connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already done so. It'd be nice to get to know you. So I'm going to go on to the next slide and let Sevkan take over.
Thank you very much, Bina. That was, from my perspective, it was quite interesting. So, thank you so much for that. Just to give everyone a bit of a background, these are the courses that we offer. We offer them both in instructor-led courses. For example, one of our instructors is Bina. We also offer a self-paced courses as well, which you can have access to from 12 months. If you do want more information about any of these courses, you can either write to me on the chat or you can always email me. I would also put my email down here as well. So just moving on to the Q&A. Bina, do you want to have a look? I saw a
Yes,
few
I'm just
questions.
looking at some questions now. That's fine actually. Let me just have a look. I think there was a question about firefighting. Let me just go down to that, which I assume is relating to risk management. Um, yeah, Yelka, how would you manage the unexpected firefighting things that you haven't accounted for? Yes, there was. I was focusing on planning, for example, but yeah, I think you're talking about risk management. Of course, risk management has to take place at any time. Things that we haven't expected, things that we think might happen that could cause a problem, could be a threat to whatever you're doing. So yes, there was obviously risk management taking place. Like, what if what if the removal company didn't arrive on time, for example? What would I do? What would I do with all my stuff? You know, there were always obviously a lot of risks, but I didn't go into risk management there. So risk management is definitely a part of project management, and I would use a Prince2 approach to managing risk, which is identify the risk. Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? Assess it for the likelihood of it happening, the impact it would have, when it might happen, what could I do about it, and so on. So yes, that was something that I did do, but I didn't include it in this particular presentation. So hopefully, Jelka, that answers your question.
Bina, just before we head on to the next question, can we have the next slide, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have a question from Sophie.
Yeah, is it in the chat? Let me just have a look.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you for arranging so kindly. Oh no, sorry, that wasn't the question. Where was the question?
Can you can you recommend any software which makes dependency diagrams quickly and easily?
Yes, I think I mentioned Miro is a fantastic tool actually. That's spelled Miro. It's a very good tool for visual things because it also gives you templates like for mind maps and anything like that. So you can do a breakdown structure using Miro. You get a lot of post-it notes. You can do the flow diagrams as well. It doesn't do it automatically, of course, but it gives you the tools to create that. So I recommend having a look at Miro. Miro. Yeah.
Yep. I realised I actually just went a bit too up towards the chat. The question is actually, what's the best project management software to use for small to medium-sized projects?
Yeah, it depends what you want to achieve using the software. Do you want to use the software to log your risks? Do you want to use the software to create your plans? Do you want software to create your business case? It really depends what you need the software to. I mean, I personally don't know all the different software that's there. I've not spent time investigating because I teach project management. I don't look at the software, but I know a lot of people use things like Monday.com. They use Jira if they use doing agile project management. So I think you've got to first of all decide if you're working for a company, does your company have a standard that they use? Do they have their own procedures? Do they already use some kind of software? If not, then think about what do you need to do? What do you need the software for? Where is it going to help you? I think that those are questions you need to look at first, and then look at some software because I think a lot of them offer like free versions of it. Play around with it and see will it do what you want. For example, I mean, traditionally things like Microsoft Project used to be used for creating Gantt charts and planning, but I think nowadays there are a lot of other tools available. I believe even Excel creates lets you create plans as well. So I think it depends. The answer is it depends what you want to do, really. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yep, thank you, Bina. I'm just looking. I can't see any more questions, but let's just give everyone a few minutes just in case they have any questions.
Okay.
Hi, Sandra. Did I miss your question?
Oh, Sandra, you said your question was just above. Let's have a look. I think that's what you're looking for as well, isn't it, Sebcham?
Yeah. Is
Are
it?
are
Yeah.
the slides available? I
Yeah.
think is that the question? Yeah, yeah, they will be. They will be. A recording of the webinar will be available.
Yeah.
Um,
I will send them all of them next week probably.
I'm just looking at the chat to see if there's any other questions.
Just while we wait for a few questions, if everyone can just answer these five, I believe, yep, six quick questions, that would be great. Mainly to obviously help us improve for future webinars. Cecilia, I couldn't actually quite understand your question about the free training sessions. Do you mean the webinars that we're doing at the moment? Yeah, so generally in terms of the webinar, we do try to have them once every, let's say, 6 weeks. Obviously, it can be, let's say, 5 weeks, or obviously it can be 7 or 8 weeks. I am speaking with a new webinar speaker. We do have some sort of idea of what the next webinar will be, but you will be receiving an email in the next, let's say, in the next month or so. But we do obviously try to have them as often as possible.
Thank you for the, I just say thank you for the comments in the chat, actually. It's nice to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodlin.
Doesn't seem that we have any more questions.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Sean.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Demibus. Thank you, Jane.
I am going to slowly end the session. So if you do have any more questions, you can always email Knowledge Train or Agile KLC or even me. I did put my email in the chat. You do have Bina's LinkedIn page. If you do want to get in contact with Bina, you can either add her on LinkedIn or you can email me and I can introduce you to Bina.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much everyone for attending. Thank you so much Bina for becoming a webinar speaker for us. Really appreciate it. I hope you and everybody else enjoyed the webinar. So thank you everyone and hope to see you in future webinars.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yep, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yep, so bye everyone.
Bye.